My name is Emma. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other. Life was simple. Neighbors waved at you from their porches. Kids played in the street until the sun went down. At least, that's how it looked from the outside. When I was little, my parents worked long hours. My father was a mechanic, always covered in grease, and my mother cleaned houses to help with bills. I spent most of my afternoons alone, or sometimes with neighbors who offered to keep an eye on me. In a place like ours, people trusted one another. Doors were left unlocked. Children ran in and out of each other's homes like family. That trust was supposed to keep us safe. Across the street lived someone I thought I could trust. He wasn't much older than me, maybe 5 or 6 years older. Old enough to feel like a grown-up in my young eyes, but young enough that adults never worried much about him. He had this way of smiling, like he knew something you didn't. My parents liked him. They thought he was responsible. "He's a good kid," they would say. "He can help watch you if we're late." I believed them. At first, I liked the attention. When you're young, and the world feels big and confusing, having someone a little older talk to you feels special. He used to play games with me. He would sit on the steps and tell silly jokes. Sometimes, when I fell off my bike, he'd help me up and say, "You're tougher than you think, Emma." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe I was tough. But there's something I didn't understand back then. Sometimes the people who seem safe are the ones who hurt you most. I remember one summer afternoon clearly. The air was thick with heat, and the cicadas buzzed so loud it felt like the whole world was humming. My parents were gone, working late again. I was outside, trying to make shapes in the clouds, when he called me over. "Hey, Emma," he said, leaning against the fence. "Bored?" "Yeah," I said. "There's nothing to do." He smiled. "Come hang out for a bit. I'll show you something cool." I didn't think twice. Why would I? He was my neighbor. My parents trusted him. I trusted him. That was the beginning of the secret I carried for years. Looking back, I can see the red flags. But at that age, you don't know what danger looks like when it's dressed in kindness. You only know what you've been taught, that neighbors are safe, that family friends are trustworthy, that if someone smiles at you, they mean well. I wish I had known better. I wish someone had told me that not everyone who acts nice has good intentions. After that day, my world changed. I didn't know how to name what happened. I didn't have the words. I just knew something felt wrong, heavy, like a shadow I couldn't get rid of. I went home that night and sat at the dinner table with my parents. My mother asked if I had fun outside, and I nodded, forcing a smile. My father talked about fixing a broken engine at work, and I just sat there, chewing slowly, wondering if anyone could see the storm inside me. But no one saw it. I started to withdraw. The girl who once laughed loudly and ran freely in the street became quieter. I stopped playing outside as much. I found excuses to stay in my room. My parents thought I was just growing up. Kids change, right? That's what they told themselves. Inside, though, I was battling confusion. Questions haunted me. Why me? Was it my fault? Should I have told someone? What if no one believed me? Every time I saw him, I froze. His presence made my skin crawl, but my voice disappeared. When adults were around, he acted normal, even charming. No one suspected a thing. That made me feel even more trapped. Sometimes at night I would whisper to myself, "Don't cry, don't tell, just be normal." But I wasn't normal anymore. I was a child carrying a secret too heavy for her small shoulders. I remember lying in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the fan. I tried to imagine a different life, one where nothing bad had happened. I pictured myself laughing with friends, feeling free, unafraid. But no matter how hard I imagined, the fear always came back. That was the beginning of my silence, a silence that lasted for years. Even as I grew older, the memories followed me like shadows. I would see him across the street, talking to neighbors, mowing the lawn, laughing like he was just another friendly face in town. Everyone seemed to admire him. Sometimes, I wondered if I was the only one who knew the truth. That thought terrified me. What if he hurt someone else? What if staying silent wasn't just hurting me, but others too? But I didn't know how to speak. My voice felt locked away, and so I carried on. I went to school. I got good grades. I smiled when people expected me to smile. I laughed when I was supposed to laugh. On the outside, I looked like every other girl. On the inside, I was screaming. No one knew. No one asked. And I didn't tell. That's how it started. That's how a single afternoon shifted the course of my entire life. Looking back now, I realize how much of myself I lost in those years. My trust, my innocence, my belief that the world was safe. But this isn't just a story about pain. It's also a story about survival, about finding strength in broken places, about reclaiming a voice that was once stolen. Because even though silence lived inside me for years, it wasn't forever. One day, the truth began to crack through. One day, I found the courage to face the shadow. But before I could get there, I had to endure the long years in between. The years of pretending. The years of fear. The years of carrying a secret that felt heavier with every passing day. I kept the secret for years. At first, I thought maybe the memory would fade if I ignored it. Maybe if I smiled enough, if I did well in school, if I acted normal, the fear would eventually dissolve. But it didn't. It sat inside me like a stone, heavy and unmovable. I was 12 when the nightmares began. They came suddenly, like storms in the night. I would wake up sweating, heart racing, convinced someone was standing in my room. I'd pull the blanket over my head, trembling, whispering to myself, "You're safe. You're safe. You're safe." But it never felt true. Sometimes, I heard his voice in my head. The way he called my name, the way he laughed like nothing was wrong. I hated that I remembered it so clearly. It made me feel like I could never escape. At school, my teachers said I was a good student but distracted. I spent hours staring at the chalkboard without hearing a single word. My friends asked, "Are you okay?" And I always replied, "Yeah, just tired." That became my excuse for everything. Tired. Just tired. But the truth was, I was exhausted from carrying something I couldn't share. One afternoon, I overheard two of my classmates whispering in the hallway. They were gossiping about another girl, someone from a nearby school, who had spoken out about being hurt by someone she knew. "She's lying," one of them said. "Yeah," the other agreed. "People make stuff up for attention." Their words cut into me like knives. I froze. My chest tightened. If people thought she was lying, what would they think of me? I couldn't bear the thought of everyone doubting me, or worse, blaming me. That day, I promised myself I would never tell. But silence is its own kind of prison. The more I kept it inside, the more it consumed me. Little things began to trigger waves of panic. Certain smells, certain sounds, even just the sight of my neighbor mowing his lawn. My chest would tighten, and I'd feel like I couldn't breathe. At home, my parents didn't notice at first. They were too busy, too tired. But eventually, my mom started asking questions. "Emma," she said one evening, as I pushed food around my plate. "You've been so quiet lately. Is everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, Mom. I'm fine." "You sure?" She pressed gently. "Just school stuff," I lied. She nodded, accepting my answer. But I saw the worry in her eyes. And I hated myself for lying to her. She deserved the truth. But every time I tried to form the words, my throat closed. I imagined the disbelief, the questions, the shame. So I swallowed the truth and smiled again. As I entered my teenage years, the weight grew heavier. I began to feel like I was living two lives. In one life, I was the girl everyone saw, quiet but hardworking, responsible, the kind of daughter parents could be proud of. I got good grades. I helped around the house. I never caused trouble. In the other life, the hidden life, I was drowning. I battled guilt, shame, and anger that I didn't know how to express. I hated him. I hated myself. Some nights, I sat on the floor of my room, hugging my knees, whispering, "Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you stop it?" I didn't understand that it wasn't my fault. One summer, when I was 15, I bumped into him at the grocery store. I hadn't seen him up close in months. He was older now, taller, his voice deeper. But his smile was the same. That same smile that once seemed harmless but now felt like poison. "Hey, Emma," he said casually, like we were old friends. My stomach flipped. My palms grew sweaty. "Hi," I muttered, barely looking at him. He grinned. "Haven't seen you around. You hiding from me?" I forced a laugh, shaky and awkward. "Just busy." He nodded, still smiling. Then he walked away, leaving me frozen in the aisle. I wanted to scream, to tell the whole store what he had done. But the words stayed locked inside, trapped by fear. I went home that night and cried until my chest ached. I felt weak. I felt powerless. And I hated that he still had that effect on me. The anger started to grow after that. Quiet at first, like a small flame, then hotter, brighter. I was angry at him for stealing my childhood, angry at myself for staying silent, angry at the world for pretending everything was fine. Sometimes, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. I saw a girl with tired eyes, hiding behind fake smiles. I wanted to break the glass, to shatter the image of the girl I had become. But even in my darkest moments, there was a part of me that refused to give up. A small voice inside whispered, "You are more than what happened to you." I didn't fully believe it yet, but it was there, fighting to be heard. When I turned 16, something happened that shook me. I overheard my mom talking to a neighbor. The neighbor mentioned her niece, another young girl, who had been hurt by someone she trusted. I froze when I heard those words. My chest tightened, my hands trembled. "She's having such a hard time," the neighbor said. "But she's so brave for telling." That word, brave, stuck with me. Brave. Was I brave? No. I was silent. I was scared. But for the first time, I wondered if maybe telling the truth wasn't impossible. Maybe it was the only way to stop the storm inside me. Still, the fear held me back. What if no one believed me? What if my parents blamed me? What if the whole town turned against me? So I stayed quiet. For a little longer. But silence has limits. You can only carry so much before it breaks you. And I was close to breaking. By the time I was 17, the silence was eating me alive. On the outside, I looked fine. I was preparing for college, taking advanced classes, smiling in family photos. People said things like, "Emma, you're so mature for your age," or "You're going to make your parents proud." And every time I heard those words, I felt like an imposter. Because if they knew the truth, if they really saw me, they'd see the cracks running deep beneath the surface. Inside, I was falling apart. The nightmares grew worse. I'd wake up gasping, my heart racing so fast I thought it would explode. Some mornings, I sat on the bathroom floor, staring at myself in the mirror, whispering, "Hold it together. Just hold it together." But it was getting harder every day. One night, after another nightmare, I couldn't stay silent anymore. I went downstairs and found my mom sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. The soft glow of the lamp made her look so gentle, so safe. I wanted to tell her everything. My throat ached with the words, pressing to come out. "Mom," I whispered. She looked up, surprised. "Emma, what are you doing awake?" I sat down across from her. My hands shook. My heart pounded. The words were there, right at the edge. I wanted to say, "Something happened. I need to tell you." But instead I said, "I just couldn't sleep." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You've been so stressed lately. College, school, it's a lot." I nodded, swallowing the truth back down. It was like I had swallowed fire. It burned inside me, but I couldn't let it out. A week later, I sat in my best friend Lily's room. We were sprawled on the floor, surrounded by half-empty soda cans and piles of homework. She was talking about her crush, laughing, twirling her hair. I tried to listen, but my chest felt heavy. "Emma, are you even listening?" she asked, playfully nudging me. I forced a laugh. "Yeah, sorry. Just distracted." She studied me for a moment, her smile fading. "You've been off lately. Like, different. Is something wrong?" I froze. My stomach tightened. This was my chance. My chance to finally let someone in. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The fear slammed into me again, suffocating, paralyzing. Instead, I whispered, "I'm just stressed about school." She didn't push. She nodded, changed the subject, and kept talking. And I sat there, screaming silently inside, hating myself for staying quiet once again. The pressure kept building. It felt like my secret had grown into a monster, one that followed me everywhere. Every time I saw my neighbor, now older, walking down the street, it was like the monster got louder. "Tell someone. Tell someone." But fear always silenced me. Then one day, something shifted. I was volunteering at the library when I stumbled across a book about trauma. I wasn't even looking for it. I just pulled it off the shelf by accident. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. And there it was, stories from survivors. People who had been hurt by someone they trusted. People who carried secrets, just like me. Their words cut straight through me. They spoke about guilt, shame, silence. But they also spoke about courage, about healing, about speaking out. For the first time in years, I didn't feel completely alone. That night, I went home and wrote in my journal. I wrote everything I had never said out loud. Every memory, every feeling, every question. Tears soaked the pages, but I didn't stop writing. It was messy, raw, painful. But it was the first time I admitted the truth, even if it was only to myself. When I finished, I stared at the words. My secret, laid bare on paper. It terrified me, but it also gave me strength. Maybe if I could write it, one day I could say it. A few weeks later, it happened. I was at a family gathering. Everyone was outside, laughing, eating barbecue. I went inside to grab a drink, and there he was, my neighbor. I hadn't expected him to be there. My whole body froze. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the glass. He looked at me and smiled that same smile. That same poison smile. And something inside me snapped. 4 years I had carried his secret. 4 years I had protected him with my silence. And now, seeing him laugh among my family, pretending to be harmless, it made me sick. I ran upstairs and locked myself in the bathroom. My heart pounded. My breath came in gasps. I stared at myself in the mirror, shaking, whispering, "No more, no more." Tears streamed down my face. I pressed my palms against the sink, trembling. That night, I knew. I couldn't keep it in any longer. If I stayed silent, it would destroy me. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a raw throat. But inside, something felt different. Stronger. For the first time, the thought of speaking didn't feel impossible. It still terrified me, but now it also felt necessary. I couldn't erase the past. But maybe, just maybe, I could take back my voice. I decided I would tell. I didn't know when. I didn't know how. But the decision was made. And that decision changed everything. I remember the exact moment I broke my silence. It was late one evening. My mom and I were sitting in the living room, the TV on low, a bowl of popcorn between us. She was talking about some show she had started watching, but I wasn't listening. My heart was racing. My palms were sweaty. That little voice inside me, the one that had been whispering for years, was screaming now, "Tell her! Tell her! Mom!" My voice shook. She turned to me. "Yeah, honey." The words sat in my throat like stones. My chest tightened. For a moment, I almost swallowed them back down, the way I always did. But then I saw her face, her eyes filled with kindness, and something inside me cracked wide open. "I need to tell you something," I whispered. Her smile faded. "Okay, what is it?" Tears blurred my vision. My hands trembled. "It's about—" I couldn't even say his name at first. My whole body shook. "When I was little, our neighbor, my voice broke. I couldn't breathe." Her eyes widened. She reached out and grabbed my hands. "Emma," she said softly, "take your time. You can tell me." I sobbed. Years of silence, years of shame, poured out of me all at once. The words tumbled, messy and broken. I told her about that afternoon, about the way it made me feel, about the nightmares, the fear, the silence I carried. When I finished, I collapsed into her arms, shaking, terrified of what she would say. For a long moment, she said nothing. My heart pounded, waiting. Then finally she whispered, "Oh my God, Emma. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I cried harder. "I thought you wouldn't believe me." She pulled me closer. "Believe you? Of course I believe you. You're my daughter. You're my world. I wish you had told me sooner, but I'm so proud of you for telling me now." Her words wrapped around me like a blanket. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. The days that followed were a blur. My parents confronted him. There were arguments, disbelief, tears. Some neighbors didn't want to believe it. Some said things like, "He's such a good kid," or "Are you sure?" Those words stung, but my parents stood by me. I'll never forget the night my dad sat at the edge of my bed, his hands shaking. "Emma," he said, his voice breaking, "I failed you. I should have protected you." "No, Dad," I whispered, grabbing his hand. "You didn't know. It's not your fault." But he shook his head. Tears filled his eyes. "If I could take it all away, I would. I promise you, I'll never let anyone hurt you again." In that moment, I realized something powerful. Telling the truth doesn't just free you, it frees the people who love you too. My silence had kept them in the dark, but my voice brought light. Not everyone reacted with kindness. Some people avoided me after the truth came out. Some whispered behind my back. I heard things like, "Why is she bringing this up now?" Or "She probably misunderstood." Those words cut deep. But I held on to the ones who believed me. My parents. My best friend Lily, who cried when I finally told her. "Emma," she said, hugging me tight, "you're the bravest person I know." For years, I had felt weak. But hearing her call me brave, it planted a seed inside me. Maybe bravery wasn't about never being afraid. Maybe it was about speaking, even when your voice shakes. The hardest part was facing him. I'll never forget standing in that room, my parents beside me, while he looked at me with that same smug smile. "She's lying," he said coldly. "She's making it up." For a second, I felt like a child again, scared, small, powerless. My chest tightened, my voice almost disappeared. But then I looked at my parents, standing firm beside me. And I realized I wasn't alone anymore. I lifted my head and said, my voice trembling but clear, "I'm not lying." The room went silent. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break my ribs. But I didn't look away. For once, I didn't shrink. I stood there, broken but unbowed. And in that moment, I took back something he had stolen from me, my voice. The aftermath wasn't easy. Healing isn't a straight line. Some nights, the nightmares still came. Some days, the shame crept back in. But something had changed. The secret was no longer just mine to carry. The truth was out. And that made all the difference. For the first time in years, I felt the faintest flicker of hope. That was the climax of my story, the moment everything shifted. The moment silence turned into sound. The moment fear turned into courage. And though the road ahead was long, I finally knew one thing for certain. I wasn't broken. I was still here. Healing didn't happen overnight. For a long time, I thought that once I told the truth, everything would feel lighter. That the nightmares would disappear, the guilt would vanish, and I'd be free. But the reality was more complicated. Speaking out was only the first step. Healing was a journey, slow, painful, and messy. Some days, I felt strong. I'd wake up, look in the mirror, and think, I survived. I told. I'm not afraid anymore. On those days, the world felt brighter. Food tasted better. Laughter came easier. But then there were the other days. The dark ones. Nights when the memories clawed their way back. Days when whispers from neighbors made me question myself all over again. Sometimes, I caught myself wondering, what if they're right? What if I should have stayed quiet? That's the thing about trauma. It doesn't leave easily. It lingers, like a shadow that follows you even in the sun. I started therapy after my mom insisted. At first, I hated it. Sitting in a room with a stranger, being asked to talk about the one thing I wanted most to forget, it felt impossible. But my therapist was patient. She didn't push. She just listened. And little by little, I began to open up. One day, I asked her, why do I still feel like it's my fault? Even though I know it isn't. She looked at me with kind eyes and said, because when you were a child, you were made to carry blame that was never yours. But that doesn't mean it belongs to you. It never did. Her words stayed with me. It never belonged to you. I repeated that to myself every time guilt crept in. Slowly, it began to sink in. My best friend Lily became my anchor. She'd sit with me on the bad nights, letting me cry without judgment. One evening, she said, "Emma, you're the strongest person I know. But you don't have to be strong all the time. It's okay to lean on people." That was another lesson I had to learn. Strength isn't about pretending you're fine. Sometimes strength is saying, I need help. Years passed. I went away to college, carrying both my scars and my new strength with me. At first, I was terrified to start fresh. What if people found out? What if they judged me? But to my surprise, I found a community. I joined a support group for survivors. Sitting in a circle with strangers who understood me without explanation was life-changing. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outcast. I didn't feel different. I felt seen, heard, believed. We shared stories. We cried together. We laughed too, because sometimes, laughter is part of survival. Those people taught me that my story didn't define me, it was just a part of me. And I could choose what came next. Looking back now, I see how far I've come. There was a time when silence was my prison. When I thought my voice didn't matter. When I believed the lie that what happened was my fault. But now I know better. I know that speaking out doesn't erase the past, but it breaks the chains of shame. I know that healing takes time, and that's okay. And most importantly, I know that I am not alone. Sometimes, I still see him. Not in person. He moved away years ago. But in my mind, in my memories, his shadow lingers. And when that happens, I remind myself, he doesn't own me anymore. My voice is mine. My life is mine. He may have written the first chapter of my story, but I'm the one writing the rest. If you're listening to my story right now, maybe you've carried a secret like mine. Maybe you know what it's like to feel trapped in silence, to feel guilt that isn't yours, to wonder if anyone would believe you. If that's you, hear me, you are not alone. I know how heavy the silence feels. I know how fear can chain your tongue, how shame can bury your truth. But I also know this, you are stronger than you think. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And even if it feels impossible right now, even if your hands shake and your throat closes every time you try to speak, I promise, one day, you'll find your voice. And when you do, the weight will begin to lift. Healing isn't quick. It isn't easy. But it's possible. I'm living proof. So if you've ever felt like me, lost, broken, silenced, please know this, you're not broken. You're not to blame. And you're not alone. I believe you. I see you. And I'm standing with you.